on the World Wide Web, on your mobile phone, and on all social media platforms. Jambo Radio.
It is over 200 years since the abolition of the slave trade, yet Black people around the world are still subjected to all kinds of discriminations. 2020 will go down in history, not just for COVID-19 pandemic, but the killing of yet another Black man, George Floyd, on the streets of the United States of America, reignited the Black Lives Matter movement. Protests across the world brought many debates on the systemic racism faced by Black people at all levels. In the UK, as in Scotland, every October is Black History Month, a time set aside each year to celebrate the contributions Black people have made in our society. But how can we change the consequences of racism when it is rooted in systems and slavery? To discuss this topic, I'm joined by Afua, Adom, who's a journalist and TV personality. Afua, thank you so much for coming on. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I really look forward to your contributions on this discussion. We're also joined by Mark. Thank you so much. We're also joined by Mark Tremaine Agbi. Agbi, okay. And Mark is the director of African and Caribbean Society in Scotland. Thank you both for coming on. So let's just get into the subject. And I will start with the lady first, obviously. How can we change the consequences of racism when it is rooted in systems and slavery? Afua, Adom.
That's a big question. It's a very big question. I think we have to, first of all, like you said, look at the roots of slavery. And I know, especially around Black History Month, when we talk about Black history, a lot of it is slavery. And it seems that, slavery seems to be the only discussion, which is actually very disappointing because there was a lot of joy to be found in Black history. But slavery is a part of it. And we have to remember that the trauma from slavery is still around today. It's around in genetics. It's around in the way that we respond to things. It's around, it can be in the physicalities of people. We might not know that we have generational trauma because of slavery, and we carry that with us today. So it is quite deep rooted. I think also it really is about history, and not just Black history, but if we talk about Scotland, it's about Scottish history. A lot of Scottish history has, there's historical references to slavery. A lot of our universities up and down the United Kingdom were built on slavery and money from slavery and from the slave trade. Now, I think that we need to acknowledge that. We don't need to brush it under the carpet. But I don't think we need to focus on it wholeheartedly because, like I said, when we talk about Black history, a lot of the times it is about slavery, but there's so much joy to be found. Now, I think it's about acknowledging our history. It's about learning from our history, and it's about moving forward and carrying it forward. If we're talking about how we can stop racism, we need to understand generational trauma. We need to understand how institutions still sort of not use slavery, but still carry those hallmarks that lead to systemic racism in education, in employment, in the police service. We need to understand where that has come from and how that plays out in today's society. And only then, when we have that level of understanding, will we be able to undo. It's like undoing stitches. So only then will we be able to unpick and make things better and figure out why things are the way they are. And like I said, to heal, to move forward and make things better.
Mark, what's your take on the subject?
I think it's very complex. It's got so many layers because we all know, shall we say, as Afua was saying, in terms of generational trauma and even genetical trauma dating back to the slave trade, whether you are, your descendants are of slaves, or if you are of direct African descent and then you come to Europe and you're hit with the perceptions of Black people being the history of slavery. I think it is so essential that the effects, the institutional racism, how Scotland and England has benefited from slavery is in the curriculum, first of all. that everyone knows that. And even when it comes to Black History Month, that we go deeper into all the achievements of Black people around the world, all the hidden gems that have been hidden or whitewashed, etc. It's even like when we think of how Egyptian history has always been put into the curriculum, but it was always westernized. It's never really dealt with the Nubians in Egypt. So all these layers in terms of perception, slavery, what it means to be Black, I think even for a young child going into school in primary before going into secondary school, the perception is Black history is just about slavery. It stops there. That has an effect on the mental health of kids, because it's kind of like a lot of kids don't want to deal with that, because the perception is you were a slave. And if everyone knows the negativity and the capitalism, the whole structure that was created from slavery, and that perception was ingrained from an early age, people would see the contributions we have, and the value of Black and African would be totally different before we go into history, like the way English people read about their history, our writers, our achievements, our inventors, all of that, because it's like we're trying to catch up. Like a lot of the industry right now with the aftermath of George Floyd, a lot of companies that are trying to diversify, that are looking at their policies, looking at their board, etc., they're trying to catch up. But we've had so many years of this, and we need to be the ones involved with the changing of the curriculum. We need to be the ones to have all of these structures change. We have to be at the table to be involved with the change, because if not, it's never been done right when it's been out of our hands. So many to close on your statement. We all want a fairer society, but from an early age, we are trying to deal with children to kind of to decolonize their mindset, so they have positive imagery, that they're happy to highlight where their culture is in white spaces, especially in Scotland. We're consistently in white spaces of institutions. So you have so much of this denial or trying to anglicize yourself to fit in. And that needs to be changed. So it's the general perception, even when it comes to charity. You turn on the TV and you see these imagery. You never see pictures or imagery of the wealth of Africa unless you watch CNN. That's it. That needs to be changed within the UK.
The general perception, you say there, Matt. I was just going to taking on the part of perception, Afua. What do you think can be done for us to be on the table, to be perhaps contributing or perhaps taking part in this conversation? It's a very important conversation that, especially now with the rise of the Black Lives Matters movement.
I think it's about more than being part of the conversation. So as the other guests so rightly said there, our mainstream media is very good at only giving us one perception on one side of Africa. And he mentioned CNN. However, there are so many other news outlets, news channels. I work for Arise News, that does much more than that and shows much more of a different side of Africa. Now, it's also very, very true what he said, that we need to be very careful when it comes to our young people about the images that we are showing them, about the images they have of Africa or wherever it is that they are from. Now, it's up to us as parents to make sure that we repatriate our children, make sure that they visit where they're from, make sure that they know where they're from. That's very important. It's also very important that we are really on top of what we show our children. What books they read, what characters they're playing with, what they're watching on television. It starts with us, and that's very important. It's very practical. It has to be a very practical thing. It has to be an everyday thing. It's about doing the work, and it's only us that can do it. It's only us that can unpick it. It's only us that can change it. And that's multi-layered, it's multifaceted.
Very interesting point that you mentioned, Afua, repatriating our children. It's very important because there's been a rise in movement of the African diaspora which is basically everybody that's connected to the continent, Black people going back to the country, African Americans, people from the Caribbean, going back to the continent to settle.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a you think that's a good movement? That's a good idea, Mark? Let me hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so if we,
I'm not sure. Sorry. I'm not sure personally myself if I think it's as honest as it should be. I mean, I also work in the entertainment industry, so I know a lot of the year of the return in Ghana, for instance, which was last year, and next year is going to be beyond the return. It was supposed to be this year, but COVID had other ideas. So last year was the year of the return, and it was largely based around our entertainment industry in Ghana, which is huge, makes a lot of money, and is amazing, has an amazing artist, and does some amazing things. It was powered by the government. Nana Akufo-Addo has had a real, has been really strong on involving the diaspora in Ghana going forward. We have to be part of Ghana's future. It's not just about sending money home. It's about resettling. It's about taking our skills back, and it's about using them. Now, the year of the return was iconic for so many reasons, and it was largely based around entertainment. There was huge festivals and things that were going out of there, and one of the most major ones wasn't actually run by a Ghanaian person. And I feel that was problematic because we have so many huge festivals in Ghana already that were established, and so many entertainment events, and that audience was taken away from them by someone who wasn't even Ghanaian. Now, to me, that doesn't sit well at all in any way, shape, or form. However, the year of the return to me was very important and very iconic. I think next year, beyond the return, will be more important. But for me, it's more pertinent that Ghana should not be the Magaluf of Africa, please. We're not doing that. We're not going there to rave, and we're not going there to make the beaches dirty, and we're not going there to be pictured falling out of hotels. I want people to go there and have a good time, but people should go to Elamina Castle. People should go to Agbi Gardens. People should go to the Ashanti region in the north and discover the history of Ghana. It's not just a party island. And I think we have to get beyond that. We have to get beyond this whole, we are the court jesters, we are the entertainers, we are only here for party. It should not be about that. Now, 300 visas were given out to African Americans by the Ghanaian government. Okay, that's fine. But at the same time, you're still charging Ghanaian people like myself over £100 for a Ghanaian passport. But you're giving African Americans passports and visas for free. Make that make sense. It doesn't. It doesn't. So what we need to do is our own people need to come first. Do you understand? So I would like a free Ghanaian passport, please. You know what I mean? Let's balance it. Yes, we need to be encouraging African Americans to find out their history. Yes, we should be encouraging people to consume our entertainment industry, but it has to be more than that. Ghana and other countries and African countries need to have substance when they're doing these things.
Need to have substance when they're doing this. Mark, what's your take on that? The movement that the African diaspora is moving back to the continent.
Okay, so if we look at, say, after the Holocaust, so I just want to make some comparisons. So when we look at after the Holocaust and Jewish people in America, Israel had, I think it was from the ages of 18, every Jewish person was given money to fly back and forth to kind of repatriate themselves with their okay. Hence why they have that connection. Hence why they have that value, like we have our own slavery thing. However, with regards to the horrors that they went through, those are always legitimate concerns, and it's never looked upon as victimhood. Whereas within our community or our diaspora, there's always that fear when you cry racism that, oh, is it really real? Because of right-wing propaganda, etc. Now, you have a lot of divisions right now in America in terms of African descendants of slavery.
Yeah.
And a lot of Africans who are going there as immigrants who are academically doing very well, which is separating them. So it's separating us all over again. Plus, you also have British, UK people going over there and taking on the acting jobs. So we're being cut up again in the form of apartheid, whereas we need to unite. Now, I understand what Afua was saying in terms of African Americans going over there. Now, I think once people know where their ancestry is from, And if most African countries agree to giving them passports, because there are people I know of right now that are taking advantage of these loopholes. I know someone that's going to Jamaica just to get a Jamaican passport, because if she gets a Jamaican passport, she can get a Canadian passport, and then she can get to Ghana and she can buy property. So there's all these kind of loopholes that you really don't want the most, how can I say, advantaged people taking advantage of the motherland, whereby we know that that land and that property is going to be worth a lot. Just like the way Chinese people are taking various areas, be it Uganda, etc. Do I believe it's right for us to go back? 100%. I do believe that the workforce of all the workforce that we have over here would do so much better improving the lives of others back there. I think it should be equal for all. I do believe that all the countries, not just Ghana, need to be on the table to bring them back home. 100%. I think perception of the differences between African and African American, those perceptions that have been ingrained in us due to colonization, need to change, because we're only as strong as one. And also when you're talking about with the promoters, it's just like what's happened in the UK when it came to Live Aid. Bob Geldof would put all these white artists up on a platform rather than have Africans make money out of their own charity. You know what I mean? We're never given the opportunity to take part in doing good for our own. You know, that white savior mentality. We have to be on the table. So I'm totally in agreement. Anything that happens on the motherland, we have to be there. It should be our own homegrown promoters.
It should be our homegrown for others. Yeah, Mark, I get you there. I'll just kind of come back to you for you. As a journalist, you work with different channels. They also, with operations in Africa, across the continent, and things like that. But you know that, the systems in Africa, they're not perfect. The challenges are massive, especially for a diaspora returning to a system where the healthcare is completely out of order. Transport system is madness. The roads are crazy. I don't know. I want to look at it from your lens. What are you? When we talked about repatriating, our children and the next generation, but the fact is, if you send your kids to the continent, and these challenges come up, they don't have a good hospital to go to if they fall ill. What do you think about that, actually?
I think, first of all, you're underestimating a lot of African countries. So one of my best friends lives in Rwanda. Her internet's better than mine, and I live in Hackney. The healthcare that she has access to is better than mine, and I live in Hackney. I've seen her office. It's beautiful. Her house is gorgeous. I worked in Lagos last year. The restaurant, we had a restaurant in our office that gave us food for free. I'm in Chiswick. No one's giving me food for free. Do you know what I mean? I think, first of all, you're vastly underestimating a lot of African countries. I mean, I can talk about Ghana, Nigeria, and Rwanda because those are the countries I know. So yes, there is challenges with healthcare. It's not the free at point of access healthcare is probably not the standard that we're used to here. Absolutely. And therefore, if you have money, then you have access to a different level of treatment. That in itself is a problem. Absolutely. I think when you're talking about working structures as a broadcaster, we have access to TVs, to high-speed internet, to all the rest of it to enable us to broadcast out of Lagos, Abuja, or Kigali. So to that, I would say that you've underestimated quite a few countries. I'll be really honest. I genuinely think that you have. My daughter is 8. She's been to Ghana 6 times. Every time she comes home, she doesn't understand why we've come home. She wants to go back. She doesn't know why she's here where it's cold and not enough people look like her. She wants to go home, and she calls it home, as do I. So I think we have to break down the perceptions of what you've just said, is that we assume that the infrastructure is crumbling. We assume that we're not going to have the internet. We assume that we're not going to have the healthcare. And like I said, I think healthcare is a slightly different issue. But until you're on the ground and you try it, you don't know.
Well, it's true. I agree with you what you're saying. I think my point there was just these are some of the challenges that are, I hear people, in Africa. I've got family back there, so I get all these challenges that they come through as we all will experience. And
But you have to remember that people here or wherever we're facing the same challenges. Our internet here in the UK is one of the worst in Europe. Like let that sink in. Internet in
the standard
Kigali
comparison. Yeah.
is better than here. Kigali is the Singapore of Africa. It has some of the tech that's coming out of that country will blow your mind. We have to remember that countries in Eastern Africa were the first to have mobile money. So the things like Monzo and Starling that we have here, they've been doing it for years. For years.
Yeah. Okay.
So these perceptions that we have, that Africa doesn't have the infrastructure to support this and that, is fundamentally incorrect. Now, I'm not saying that's across the board. I'm not saying that there isn't people who are living on the poverty line and are desperately poor. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is they are in the UK too. So when we are talking about Africa, we have to be very, very careful, because those ideas are the ones that we will be perpetuating to our young people. And I can't be part of that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, but it's just the fact that we can't deny the reality in some countries. Those countries that you mentioned are a very good example in terms of internet infrastructures, and also Ghana, Nigeria, and Rwanda, which are countries I've traveled to. I was just thinking, like, there are other African countries that do still have this image of. Not just the image, not perception, basically the reality of those countries. There's too much poverty created by the system that are in place, but it doesn't mean that there's no progression. There are progression. The African diaspora is doing quite a lot in developing these countries. That's true.
The people of that country are doing more. Let's not say that it's everybody who's been educated in the West and coming home. That's disingenuous.
I don't agree that the African diaspora,
Ghanaians, Nigerians, and Rwandans are doing more than we are. So let's get that. Let's nail that first of all. That's very problematic if that is the perception that we have, that diasporans are the ones that are pushing the country forward. That is disingenuous. That is not true. Diasporans are part of it. But why are we saying that diasporans are doing better than Ghanaians, Nigerians, and Rwandans?
Okay, one thing we can probably all agree on: there is no glass ceiling in Africa whatsoever. No glass ceiling. You have an idea, whether you're, depending on your level of education or not, you have an idea. With investment, you have it there. You want to build, you don't have all these problems of permits. You want to build something. Okay, you can build it.
Yep. You want a skyscraper, you find the money and you build it.
It's a different game plan. Right, and it is questionable for all of us while we're still here, and that is the thing. You go back, you come back, and you think, what am I doing back here? It's kind of the fundamentals of our plan. From my experience, it wouldn't be from healthcare that are issues. It's just certain infrastructure, whereby most people who want to go back want to work for a foreign firm because there's no corruption in your contract. So I'm just saying this from a Nigerian perspective. Of corruption, in terms of, we need, how can I say, guarantees in life, and those kind of things. And corruption could even be to do with disputes in the court. Corruption goes so far that money talks in every single angle, which benefits a certain few and doesn't benefit others. But I agree with what you're saying about the diaspora. But that's that same mentality of when we take the skin off it. It is a white supremacist idea that we can, we have this mentality that even if you come overseas and you're a doctor, you nearly have to start again because your qualifications aren't recognized. Plus, then we don't have limits on anyone can open up an institution in Nigeria. Do you understand? So we don't have those regulators. So it's all those small parts. It's not we've got the skilled people. There's certain things we just need to fix. We also have tribalism. We don't have it like back in the day. You had an Associated Press that would filter through facts. We're living through a fake time now. We're living in America. We have fake news. We have it in the UK. We have it in Africa as well. Africans are going through the same issues that we have here. We have fundamental Christians. We have evangelicals. We have all of these same issues. So the issues aren't just that perception that, okay, you go back, will my child get healthcare? Like for me, I lived in Nigeria from 11 to 13. And those years, when I came back to Europe, I was ahead in school, but I was younger. So my education skill set was well above. Standard of living, well above. I didn't know why I was going back to a grey world. The best childhood, plus you have a sense of identity. You can't, it's very hard on kids if they don't have an identity and grounding to shape themselves, you know? We do have to change that mindset as well. You know, I would never go or encourage that, okay, if you're overseas, you can take advantage of those forms of privilege. Not at all.
Yeah, and going back to the question of the consequences, I like the input there, Afua, where the African narrative need to change, and I think voices like your own are very important in this conversation going forward, and some of the things that we've discussed earlier here. So I wasn't alluding that as a negative thing, but it's just the fact that there are some realities that we need to be checking out, and when we have a platform to discuss this, let's talk about it, and not shy away from it. So. Absolutely, I agree with you. I like that narrative, and I like that going forward. We'll bring that back into the conversation on the consequences of racism. It's something that's always discussed mostly in the West, because I don't think racism is being discussed in the African continent.
Well, I think that's because, I mean, if I was living right now in Ghana, I would have privilege, right? Because I wouldn't be othered. I would be the majority. So therefore, if black men were being shot by the police, there would just be men being shot by the police, and the story probably wouldn't be about racism. It would be about police brutality and how the police carry themselves and behave. I would have black privilege. So I think that's why countries in Africa especially find this so fascinating. And I speak to my colleagues that work in Lagos and all across Africa, and they cannot believe, they know that it's true, right? But they cannot believe that we would be subjected to such treatment outside of, in an America, in the United Kingdom. Black privilege is a real thing, it is a real thing. And, I feel it when I step foot in Ghana, and there's an added level of privilege being a diasporan, because you have a posh accent. But that when with a taxi driver doesn't really work, does it? Because I'm being charged double.
Yeah, I think we all experience that.
I think that's why those discussions. Yeah, I think that's why those discussions are different, because of the level of privilege that is afforded because you are of the majority.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll just Mark, you think the consequences of racism is not much discussed in this racism is not something we discuss in Africa, but there is another form of discrimination.
Probably in the South. Like, I mean, if you look at the South Africa, Botswana, countries like that were the effects of apartheid. Totally. You have divisions, you have colored people who never knew that they came from black. This was all architects of the Dutch. You understand? So you have those divisions there. We deal with tribalism in West Africa. That's the issue.
Huge.
Tribalism. Yeah, and coming to America, like when it's kind of like, I did an interview with a gentleman yesterday, whose father moved from Nigeria to Scotland in 1920.
Wow.
One of the first doctors. Royalty, I think he had 4 practices, and I was trying to build a picture and get how these elites were treated in Europe, because my dad came to Dublin in 1958, and it's interesting that they came over they never knew anything about racism, and the way they were treated, like kings. And we see how things have changed in terms of the more immigrants who came over in the 70s, the perception of racism, division, how all of these things, how it changed the narrative. Plus, most importantly, what it changed was the word African. The African, the idea of Africa is totally changed. The imagery, the savagery, the charities, everything totally changed. So that idea of Africa being everything negative, plus you have the Black American experience, slavery, roots in the 70s. All these things that were ingrained, and there was never any programs that were put through to actually recondition white people who've just seen about, oh, we had some dominance over them, or the effects of the kids who had to go into work or go into school who were called nigger for the first time, the N-word, shall I say. So all of these things, and then you arrive, like Nigeria has no reason to teach kids about racism, but I do think that's something that needs to go on the curriculum, because you cannot have people arriving, they don't know what they're up to face. Hence why you have so many people voting in Nigeria for Donald Trump. They don't understand the concept of racism. You understand?
Yeah.
What they understand is the evangelical conservative Christian mentality.
Yep.
They don't understand that you're voting for the oppressor.
Yeah.
It's very important to know all these things, because it's not just fake news, it's policies. It's policy changes the education and for our kids to fulfill their potential. And we're going backwards over there, and we're going forwards in Africa.
Education is a key. Afua, I'm just going to pick up on something you mentioned earlier about, you getting charged. Some of us getting charged for passports, for African passport, when those government are issuing passport to African Americans for free, basically. If we say the African diaspora, is the African American not an African diaspora in your view?
Explain that again.
Oh, definitely. But I mean, I can trace my roots, as in, like, I have so much of my family still in Ghana and still alive now. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying slavery and the effect of your family being taken from where they are, placed in America, completely ripped away from the world. I'm not in any way downplaying that at all. However, my mother and father were born in Ghana, therefore I'm entitled to a Ghanaian passport too. So, if an African American, Mark Johnson, can get a Ghanaian passport for free, I also want one for free. Hold on, my mom and dad want to renew theirs for free because they're actually Ghanaian, and so am I. So it's about the government placing more value on the African Americans than Ghanaians in the diaspora, saying that we want you to come, so we're going to ask you to come for free, but you, who were born in Kumasi in 1948, you must pay for your passport.
But the government can argue. The government can argue that we are attracting African American because of the disconnect that they've had with the continent, with the country, so that they can come and discover it. So it would be good to make it easier.
That's all very well and good, and that's great. My father, who left Ghana in the 70s to come here and be a dentist and form a Ghanaian association and look after Ghanaians that came to this country, who came to Scotland in the 70s and 80s and formed a branch of the MPP and was consistently sending money back home and always helping his family and trailblazing in dentistry, in facial surgery, in the Troubles in Belfast in the 70s as a black man. Does he not deserve his passport for free?
I think that's a question for the Ghanaian government.
I'll be asking them. Don't worry.
And I think, you know what I like though? I like when we have our issues that we clean up our house in-house.
Yes,
it's really good that we're having this discussion amongst us. But this is also a discussion for back home in terms of you've created some very valid points, and a lot of people would agree with you. And I can't imagine there would be much opposition. It's just that it seems that, the way the spotlight is on that period right now, bringing people back home and want to see disparities.
It's true.
It's only when we see failures and things that we can address them and get them fixed.
Absolutely.
We all have to stand united. 100%.
Absolutely. I think I'll just move on to the second question, which is racism bigger than police actions on the street? Afua, Adom.
Is racism bigger than police actions on the street? In what way? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like the actions that the police, the brutality of the police on the street, on you in London, the search, stop and search, which is massive, very discriminative in the way it's implemented. So those are police actions that is happening on the street, against Black people. So, is it more than that? Is it institutional? Is the police basically an institutional racist organization?
The violence that we see exhibited by a small proportion of police officers against Black men and women is the tip of the iceberg. Racism is systemic, it's institutional, it's subtle, it chips away. It's not always someone shooting you or calling you an N-word. It's, not getting that job because of your name on an application. It's your child being told that they have ADHD, but instead they're just not being properly catered for in class. But it's the tip of the iceberg. The violence that we see is the tip of the iceberg. And I think that's the very worst of it. Usually it's more subtle, it's systemic, it's ingrained. People don't even know they're doing it. It's not being picked on a dating site because you're Black. It's being followed around a store because they don't think you can afford anything and you're about to steal. It's being stopped in the way out of Sainsbury's for the security guard to check your bag. That it's very subtle, very ingrained, and it's all the time.
Mark?
Yeah, if we look at the statistics, right now on the UK Gov website with regards to exclusions in schools, okay, you have the highest was Roma Gypsies at 17% of exclusions. Now, remember, there may not be that much in school, so if it was a small amount, it's a large amount that would be included. But the highest amount was Afro-Caribbean, so Caribbean kids, and it was 10.72% of Black boys excluded. Now, when I speak to parents in London, and they've told me it's small, minor offences, if just like it's the perception from the teacher playing the playground. It's like, what age is it where the boy goes from the cute, beautiful kid to being that threat? And speaking with parents and seeing how the difference between the disparity in how the child's exclusion goes on their record towards a white child not getting excluded, towards girl, and this happens the same thing with girls and boys. So we have the British mentality that's ingrained in us living here is that it's so easy for us to look over our shoulders at America in terms of the prison to school pipeline, but we have that issue right here. So when we're talking about the violence or the stabbing culture, and we're thinking of this is a symptom of institutional racism, where you feel where these kids have been shunned from the system from a very small age and going to the job center, no employment, all resources taken from the communities that they live in. It's not just you also have how many times you get stopped in a car in London and being told, I was here, I think it was on my last trip, and I was going to Halford to buy in Brixton, where my previous home was. I was only in Brixton 10 minutes to buy a camera from because I was going camping, and I was stopped. And the excuses I was given was the car I drive is a car of a drug dealer, but because I don't fall into the 18 to 24 age group, they didn't need to ask me to come out of the car to check me because I don't fall in the demographic. So they want the Black man, you need to be of a certain age demographic to do the proper stop and search. Do you understand? So it's all of these things. Now, I'm not living in London full time. So that was I was only here 2 days before going on camping. But that is an everyday occurrence. Then you have lending practices. So you're an entrepreneur. Some of the issues you don't have when you go to Africa. You have an idea, you have a business plan, but you have to go to a Black lender or get advised because it's 3 times harder. The criteria of you getting a loan. So it's not just the police, it's education, it's the nursing. Look at the NHS, look at COVID, look what COVID has shown us. We're talking about our health professionals, we're talking about our doctors, right? We're not just talking about PPE, we're talking about the fear of reprisals for reporting issues, of being put on the front line, and then taking your overtime hours away from you. Now, the BBC, apart from diversifying and making sure that 10% of the workforce is BAME, that's another issue, BAME. That doesn't.
I hate it.
Yeah.
Hate it.
What do you make of what do you
Hate
make of that? Is that what is it? Acronym of
Just say black.
Yeah,
Just say black.
we've been ostracized again. That's cuts to our
That's it.
rights. That's the same
Just
thing
say
as when the
black.
Racial Equality Commission was changed to the whole Equality Commission. It's like whenever we have our rights, they get stripped away. So everything we fight for, they'll jump on the bandwagon and protest with us, and other things get put through. And remember, that's the same thing that happened in 1968. Civil rights.
So Mark, you feel like black people are bundled into a group of other people rather than
No, that's what's happening. That's what's happening right now. So when you have an argument, so right now for me, looking at monitoring companies to have a look at their diversity policies, okay, in terms of the workforce, how many people do they have on the board, okay? The BAME is an excuse because they can fill that quota, but BAME covers Polish people as well. So once they fill that quota, that's all they have to do. We never asked for that label. I never got a letter in the post stating from my signature that all of a sudden I'm in this category.
Yeah, I thought I was just black.
Yeah,
just black.
And there's nothing wrong in saying black, and that's
it.
even for kids. We should say it out loud and proud. And white people,
and with a capital B as well.
There is nothing, and that's why we're in Black History Month. Say it loud and proud, and I'm happy for all the other companies, including Sainsbury's, who have now said that they're pushing it.
Yeah, I only shop at Sainsbury's now. Yeah. Everything. Clothes, food, car, anything. Change my home insurance. I wish they provided electricity. Everything from Sainsbury's.
You support us, we support you. The black pound is a wealthy pound.
And anyone who's got a problem with it can just keep it moving because we don't care. And that's exactly what Sainsbury's said. And it was so strong. And that's what I loved about it. It was like, it's not about othering. We encourage our employees to celebrate Black History Month. And if you don't like it, shop at Tesco.
I understand. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. So the last question for you will be, obviously, part of the Black identity has been the fact that we're growing up. Some of us that have grew up in this country. We a few years ago we could not see people like us on TV more frequently. We could only see them when they come up in football games, or they're performing. For entertain, or they're doing some entertainment stuff. We didn't have clever journalists like yourself that will come on tele and bring a big debate and be very bold. So how's your journey like in that industry?
Oh wow, that's a good question. I mean, I have been a journalist for a long time. I graduated in 2004 or 5, I think. So that's
no longer than me, but that's 15,
fine. About 15, 16 years. And I started off in print. And to be honest, I always gravitated towards writing for my culture, so to speak. So I was working on Black women's magazines like Pride, Black Beauty, Black Hair, that kind of thing. And then I started working for Arise News, which is where I am now, which is an African news channel based in London, Lagos, Joburg, New York, all around. And so I've always gravitated towards that, and that's enabled me to make my biggest leaps. It's enabled me to learn the most, to push on more. And I think it was probably quite deliberate in the way that I was doing it. And I was always much more accepted amongst my own people, to be honest. I was the editor of the biggest magazine for Black women in the country, but I would never have been the editor of Vogue or Glamour or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? But it enabled me to learn. And being here at Arise News has enabled me to learn so much because I was put on screen when probably I wouldn't have been put on screen at that point in my career in the BBC. It allowed me to develop skills so that when the likes of Sky and CNN and everyone else came calling, I was ready. So in that sense, because I've placed myself quite strategically within companies that accept me by skin color, accept me and the skin color has really enabled me to develop loads of great skills, and meant that yes, when I got to do more quote unquote mainstream stuff, that I was ready for it. But I mean, now being on your ITVs, which I do pretty much every week, Sky yesterday, CNN in the next couple of weeks, it can be hard because as a Black woman, initially you're pigeonholed to talk about Black Lives Matter and things like that. But now, if it's arts and culture or news or current affairs or anything, I can be called upon to talk about that. And that is brilliant. And I love that more because, and a lot of people say to me, it's just another person talking about the news. We don't see you as Black or white or a woman or a man. You're just a knowledgeable person talking about the news, and that's what I want to be most of all. So don't get me wrong, there's been tough moments, absolutely, but I've always had my father's wind in my sails. He was always just like, I don't understand why you're not a BBC anchor, and I'd be like, doesn't work like that, Dad. You know what I mean? Like the year I came out of uni, he was like, I expect to see you on the World Service, and I was like, it's gonna take a little while. But he's always just instilled in me that I could be anything, absolutely anything that I wanted to be, and that's what keeps me going.
Absolutely. Well, that's a fantastic story. Mark, your personal journey in your own experience. So, what has been some of the challenges that you face, as a person, as a Black person, with with interacting with the system?
Okay, so I've come from a music background. So I've been in the business since late 90s and moved away from the UK to Germany because of that glass ceiling. Had a lot of success over there, and then went from there to Universal in New York. And that's where my American experience was, where I kind of see there's no glass ceiling whatsoever. So coming back to the UK, and what I'm happy about with the UK is the whole grime revolution, because it's the first time where kids have people like themselves. They're telling their own stories, and it's not, how can I say, it's not depicting a certain image, even though the media will jump on drill and say that this is the reason for that, etc. But yeah, it's these issues are always there, like with regards to how the objectification of Black women. So the women that are chosen for music videos. So I empower certain women on videos that I'm involved in, and mainly because I've seen how when I set up my own label, I've seen how before being told by the label, oh, we need girls that are more lighter, etc. I've seen that these are issues dictated by someone else above me. So now that I'm in a position to change all those perceptions, and now with being the director at ACSS, I've got a TV program on ITV tomorrow. So it's basically just documenting the lives of young kids, Scottish kids of African descent, putting them up on these platforms because they don't see themselves. And my joy out of it is how vibrant they are to go back into school to talk about their South African culture, the Zimbabwe culture, their Nigerian culture. So these racial things they're always there, but I just feel that this window that we have right now, I'm keeping this window open as long as possible.
Me too. Me too.
And getting as many people, and not being these gatekeepers, which I do find a part of the English or the British culture, is just, okay, I am the token. I don't want to let anyone in, so I'm not going to pass those on.
Yeah.
So
we have to bring people through. I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, 100%.
Because I don't know about you, I don't want to work forever. So boy, let me train someone. So when I'm ready to retire to Ghana and learn to surf, you can just step into my place.
When are you planning to retire?
A couple of months. Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. Oh, okay. Remember, you got the wind. Your dad's wind in your sails. So
I know he wants me to keep going.
Afua Adom, journalist and media personality, thank you so much for coming on. Mark Agbi, Director of African and Caribbean Society, I really appreciate your time. This has been very insightful and very educative. Afua, keep that narrative going. I'm going to join you on the bandwagon. So I'm absolutely up for that. And Mark, thank you so much. I know we'll be catching up a lot because Mark, you're running the African and Caribbean Society in Scotland. I think there'll be quite a lot that.
We are interviewing. We're interviewing a lot of personalities. Afua, I'll be chasing you for an interview. So we've got a TV show at present, and we have various personalities, and we have the all-dayer on the 24th. We actually have the Sienna Lee, who was runner-up on The Voice, so she's going to be massive for next year. And we're putting everyone.
Yeah, I'd love to. Give me a shout.
100%.
On the World Wide Web, on your mobile phone, and on all social media platforms. Jambo Radio.